Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. If you're somebody like me who's pursuing minimalism, sometimes it can feel just a little bit overwhelming, like you're not sure how far to go, or whether when you declutter or when you stop shopping, you've gone far enough. And then there's the issue of like, am I spending enough time doing declutters? Am I putting enough effort into this? I think in social media, we often see that image of the prototype of the perfect minimalist, somebody who has almost nothing in their space or their home. And I think for a lot of us, that can feel overwhelming and make us feel like we're not sort of good minimalists. Well, I'm here to tell you that I think minimalism can look a lot of different ways, and it really is about finding a balance that works for you in the long term. For some people, only having a small backpack might work. Maybe they're travelers, maybe there are reasons why they want to have that little, but not all of us have to go that far to still be pursuing minimalism. And I truly believe that minimalism is a journey, it's not a destination, it's a process. And so today I just want to discuss how do we balance those pressures that society tells us to have more stuff while also balancing that desire to pursue minimalism and to get closer to our own values. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that everybody has a different lifestyle and different priorities. And to me, it makes sense that different people have different amounts of different stuff. You might have different belongings if you're an artist versus a lawyer versus a carpenter. Different people need different things for what they do, or even for their hobbies or how they like to spend their time. And so I think it's important to just acknowledge that minimalism can look starkly different for different people. And that's okay. To me, that's part of the process. And I want to acknowledge openly that I think if a lot of you came to my home and looked around, you might actually say, to me, this isn't minimalist, because you might think with the stereotype that's out there that I have too much stuff. But I do think that for me, it's about this journey and that I am trying to find this balance and this kind of like place where I'm not overwhelmed by my stuff, where it's not taking so much of my time, but where I still am functioning day to day the way I'd like. And I will acknowledge, I think I still have a little ways to go in that journey. I don't think I'm totally there yet to where ideally I'd like to be, but I do see as I slowly move closer to minimalism and as I just inject more of that mindset into my life, I do find it easier and easier, and it's getting better and better. So for me, since I do a lot of audio work and video work, I have a lot of gear, for example. But that doesn't mean that I can't be a minimalist. I use this stuff regularly. And so there's a purpose to it, there's a reason for it, and to me that's okay. Now, can I probably declutter some of the extraneous gear that I don't use as much? As I notice I'm using it less, I do try to get rid of it. So I really think it's about figuring out where your values lie and what you really need and use on a regular basis. So I just explained sort of my overarching principles in finding that balance with minimalism, but I want to go into specific strategies or tools you can use to try to help you find that balance. My first piece of advice is to ask yourself the hard questions. Am I keeping this item for the right reasons? What are my motivations in this moment? Asking yourself those things right when you're in the middle of declutters can really help improve the whole process of decluttering and hopefully get you closer to minimalism. I do have a video about questions to ask yourself when you're decluttering, so I'll link that here. I also have a video about lies we tell ourselves about our clutter that is very related to that, so I will also link that one immediately after. Basically, I think it's important for us to just really ask ourselves those tough questions and put our stuff to the test. Do I really use this? Is this really bringing value to my life? And be willing to notice the process and mistakes you're making along the way. There's a lot of research that self-reflection, so kind of looking back and analyzing how you think you did on something and what you could do better or how you could do it better, actually helps us improve our performance on a variety of different things. And so I think it makes sense that it would apply to decluttering or other skills involved in minimalism, that if we use self-reflection and really are honest with what we've done and the progress we've made and what we could do better, I think it'll just make it easier to move closer to minimalism. My second piece of advice is to practice some self-compassion. And I say this especially because there is that stereotype of the perfect minimalist. I think it's so easy to feel like, well, I'm a fraud, I'm not really a minimalist, or I need to get rid of more before I can call myself a minimalist. And I honestly struggle with that day to day because I don't necessarily fit the stereotypical mold of a minimalist. I do still have a good amount of stuff around my home, but I'm still constantly thinking about it, I'm pursuing it. And so sometimes I just need to practice some self-compassion and realize, look how much progress I have made, and focus on that positive of what I've done and the positive effects it's had on my life. I just feel like you shouldn't try to compare yourself, like I said before, because we all have different jobs, priorities, hobbies, ways we like to spend our time. And so if we try to compare ourselves or our version of minimalism to somebody else, it's just probably going to lead to us feeling bad about ourselves, and it's probably actually going to hurt our journey towards minimalism because we're going to feel down on ourselves, we're going to feel hopeless, and hopelessness is not helpful for making progress or producing behavior change. So I really think use positive reinforcement rather than punishment or negative reinforcement, which are shown to be less effective at changing behavior. Find ways to kind of be your own cheerleader and to practice some self-compassion for the areas that you want to improve upon. My third tip is to identify the biggest barrier or problem you have in pursuing minimalism. And in my studying in psychology, I learned that one of the best ways to improve a situation is to really identify what the problem is or the barrier is to you getting to where you want to be, and then problem solve that issue. So figure out what your barriers to minimalism are. Maybe it's a tendency to overshop. Maybe it's finding time in your schedule to actually do the declutters. Maybe it's getting rid of enough during the declutters. Maybe it's figuring out what's the best way to get rid of the stuff. Figure out what your biggest barrier is or hang up or kind of anxiety or fear around minimalism, and try to address it head on. Make a list of ideas for how to overcome this issue. And I think just use yourself as an asset. You have a brain on your shoulders. You can figure out how to propel yourself forward and make the changes that you want to make. My fourth tip in finding the balance is to take some time to focus on other areas of your life and take breaks on focusing all your time on minimalism. I think it can be easy to get so wound up in this process and to almost get addicted to the process of decluttering. But I think it's important to recognize that there are other important aspects of our life, and minimalism, to me at least, is really about pursuing those values and those interests and passions that you have, even in other areas. So try to spend some time really reflecting on how you want to be spending your time and just start doing the things that you love and enjoy or are meaningful to you. Now I'm going to take a quick break to talk about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare, which is an online learning community that offers a bunch of different classes. I think it relates to that last point I made about just going out and pursuing your interests and your passions. I think Skillshare is one tool to do that actually. And members get access to thousands of classes on all kinds of topics at many different skill levels. I think it's cool that Skillshare is constantly coming out with new classes. There aren't any ads, so it's just a really good place to learn. It's also less than $10 a month with a premium subscription. But the first 1,000 people to click the link below in the description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So this is an easy way to try it out for free if you have interest. Most recently, I was taking a course made by Khalees, a singer-songwriter and chef. It's called Creative Cooking: Simple Sauces to Elevate Every Meal. I'm really interested in cooking, so this was a fun way to increase my knowledge about the subject, but also just find fun ways to make the flavors more interesting. Anyway, back to the main topic of this video. My fifth tip for finding the balance when it comes to minimalism is to envision a realistic future. I've talked about in previous videos finding an image of a dream future you have, what minimalism could do for your life. What would your life actually look like? But I think when we think in terms of finding the balance, it's important to recognize that sometimes that image can be kind of this imaginary dream self that isn't necessarily realistic. And so I think it's helpful to really imagine a future that consists of what's important to you without going super extreme and thinking that you will have like absolutely nothing unless that's actually something that would work well and fit into your life. I think just figuring out like what will minimalism look like for me, and maybe you can't fully figure that out yet until you get there, because I have noticed that as I declutter, I notice I can declutter more than I thought I could and I'm still fine. And so maybe this image does shift over time, but I think finding a realistic happy medium of what works for you and your life and your needs, I think can help give you the motivation in that it can make it feel more doable. At the same time, I'd still encourage you to stretch yourself a bit in what that image is, because I think sometimes when we just push ourselves a little farther to try to imagine a life where we really do have less, it can make a big impact in our declutters and in reducing our shopping. My sixth and final tip is to, on a regular basis, sit back and think about what is a finite next step for me to take in my minimalism journey. I think always having just one step in mind as you're in the process of moving towards minimalism can help clarify, like, what do I do next? How do I get there? Maybe your long-term value is living a life with more minimalism, but you need to think about goals or signposts along the way to see yourself getting there. So a finite next step might be, there's one closet, I want to declutter that. Or it could be about reducing shopping, or it could be about spending more time doing the things that you enjoy. Whatever it is, figure out what your finite next step is so that you can make sure to have a balance in pursuing minimalism, keeping that process moving, while also still doing other things in your life that are important. So in this video, I just want to emphasize that, again, minimalism is going to look different for different people, at least in my opinion. And that's okay. And that's almost like the beauty of it. You need to figure out how it functions in your life. And that might even shift and change over time. But I think maybe I want to make this video to just help rid you of some of that minimalism angst that can come up, where we feel like we're never quite there, or we feel like we could be better because there's always someone who's a better minimalist than we are. And I just want to reassure you that I think it's okay if we're not perfect, even with the standards that we set for ourselves. I think what's most important is whether we're creating the space and time in our lives to address minimalism, to make those movements toward minimalism. And if you feel like you're not doing that, how can you integrate it more into your life if it's something that you want to pursue? If you feel like it's overpowering your life, how can you take a little step back and make sure that you're giving fuel to the other areas of your life that matter to you? So that's really all I've got for you. If you want to see more videos on minimalism and that sort of thing, please hit the subscribe button below, hit the like button if you ended up enjoying the video. But thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.